Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. All the news, all the updates, big time bets, everything you need for your fantasy hockey team.
Your Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's the start of a new week for fantasy hockey leagues. Thank you so much for tuning in to your favorite podcast, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Steele Rodin, flying solo today, and we got a lot to talk about. Big time bets, of course, at the end of the episode. We're going to do a little bit of a must drops segment on today's episode as well. Players that you just need to get rid of from your fantasy team. And of course, to start off the new week on Monday's episode, we got to do the waiver wire must adds to start with. That is what we always start with on the new week to start the new week for each episode on Monday. I've got 3, maybe even potentially 4 guys for everyone out there who is in fantasy hockey leagues to consider keeping their eyes on, or potentially even picking up today or in the next couple of days, because they've got an advantageous schedule ahead of them, as well as they're just playing really, really good hockey. So to start with in the waiver wire must adds list for this week 6 fantasy hockey league, I'm starting off with a goalie. I'm starting off with someone in the crease. This is something Flip and I have talked about over, the last little while, the last few episodes, with all the different goalie injuries and the poor play that we've seen so far in the 2022-23 season from the players in the crease right now. And I'm going to throw out Jake Allen from the Montreal Canadiens. Only owned at 38% on Yahoo, 12.5% on ESPN League. So if you're a fantasy owner out there, and, I've talked about this at length, if you have a goalie like Thatcher Demko, a goalie like Jordan Binnington, you have Frederick Anderson out on the IR, and, obviously Antti Ranta is not available, and there's a couple of other injuries for the goalies in the league. I would really, really strongly suggest Jake Allen as a pickup because, A, he is available, and he's on a very, very structured Montreal Canadiens team. Yeah, I don't think they have the best blue line in the league, but Martin St. Louis has done a fantastic job ever since becoming the head coach of that organization, really getting the kids, the young guys, to believe in the system and work with them every single day. So I think there's been instilled more confidence throughout this team heading into this new season as well. They're on a 3-game win streak right now. Jake Allen has a 5-5-0 record, so it's not the best, but yet again, he's been playing decent hockey over the last couple of games as well. And I think you're catching the Montreal Canadiens at a very prime time in the season right now. They have 3 games coming up this week, and their schedule this week does start with a little bit of a tough matchup between the New Jersey Devils, which starts on Tuesday. But the rest of the week, the rest of the month. I look at the rest of the month here for November, and I believe it's really much of a cakewalk. Now, I know it's still the NHL, and teams can win whenever they want, and even teams at the bottom of the league can still get W's from time to time. We've seen that with the Arizona Coyotes, but to me, the rest of the month is a little bit of a cakewalk for the Montreal Canadiens. They played the Columbus Blue Jackets twice, which their goalie tandem has not been great. And losing Zach Werenski for the rest of the season is pretty awful as well. They play the Philadelphia Flyers, which I think they came out way more hotter than we established or expected from them, and they're going to slow down a little bit. Same with the Buffalo Sabres, who they play in the month of November, the San Jose Sharks, and the Chicago Blackhawks. That is their next 6 games in the month of November besides the New Jersey Devils, and I believe it's a cakewalk, and Jake Allen's going to get most of those starts, except for when it's a back-to-back situation and Sam Montembeault is going to come in. So for me, Montreal has been very surprising. That's who I'm starting with, Jake Allen in the crease. But I'm actually going to continue with the Montreal Canadiens and talk about his teammate, a new addition to the team as well, Kirby Dach, who is only owned at 37% on Yahoo Fantasy Leagues and 16.8% on ESPN Fantasy Leagues as well. So he is definitely out there. He is definitely available. And again, like I mentioned for Jake Allen, this is probably the prime time for someone who is struggling in their fantasy leagues right now to go out and get a guy like Kirby Dach, especially with the guys that I'm going to mention that are a must-drop player for this upcoming week. But Kirby Dach has 9 points in his last 6 games for the Montreal Canadiens, 14 points in 15 games this year. He has 65% of his points just in the last 6 games, the last week or the last week of games. So he's been undeniable, unstoppable for the Montreal Canadiens, and he's doing everything fantastic and everything he can to help them get wins over the last stretch of games as well. But playing on that top line with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield has really blossomed this guy's ability to showcase some of his skill set, showcase some of his speed, showcase, he's still a young player. He's only 21 years old, but he still can get things done at the NHL level, which I don't believe we saw when he was with the Chicago Blackhawks for his first 3 years. So Kirby Dach is playing absolutely phenomenal right now. And yet again, like I mentioned, the Montreal Canadiens have a very advantageous and beautiful schedule coming up for the rest of the month of November. So that is another player that I myself will be keeping an eye on as well. But again, like I said, playing with that new speed that he seems to have found. We know he has stick handling ability, but also playing with those other 2 young studs, Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, I think it's really established and helped his game. And maybe probably not is getting in his own head as much and is not thinking about what he needs to do to impress everyone or get the job done. But it just looks a lot more fun for him out there playing with those young guys. So Kirby Dach is the next player I'm looking at. I have 2 more players, but I'll mention this guy real quick. Ivan Barbashev of the St. Louis Blues. This one might be a little bit of a toss-up in the air. You're not really sure what I'm thinking over here, Steele. But he's only owned at 17% on Yahoo, 13% on ESPN leagues. This is a guy that didn't really establish anything until last year. He had 60 points last year. He doesn't put up a ton of shots, hits, and blocks, but he had 60 points last year for the St. Louis Blues. They're on a 2-game win streak right now. They've won their last 2 games, and I really do believe that we have seen the worst already from the St. Louis Blues with that 8-game losing streak. I don't think that's going to happen again. And I'm not saying they're not going to have a losing streak once again, but to have an 8 games and in that fashion and the temper tantrums from Jordan Binnington and Ryan O'Reilly just not producing whatsoever, none of the team producing whatsoever. So I think we've seen the worst from the St. Louis Blues. We know they're a better team than this. And we know Ivan Barbashev is better than what he's been producing as well. So this might be a good time to catch some of their players that have been dropped over the last couple of weeks as well. And Ivan Barbashev is one of those guys. 2 goals, 3 assists so far on the season, but 4 of those points have come over the last 6 games. He is getting shots, 2 or 3 shots, 2 or 3 hits, and a block every single game the last stretch as well. So I think that just adds on to the value and the availability that is out there for Ivan Barbashev. They also have 4 games this upcoming week, the St. Louis Blues. So they take on the Avalanche, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Washington Capitals, and the Anaheim Ducks. So 2 out of 4 of those games are really advantageous and really looking for a good game from all of their players up front. Again, the Avalanche, maybe even the Capitals, you could say, might be a little bit more of a difficult situation with what's been going on with them. But nonetheless, Ivan Barbashev is the 3rd guy to add, to keep your eyes on for the Week 6 fantasy hockey leagues. We're going to continue on the talk of waiver wire ads. We're going to get to big time bets. We're going to get to some must drop players. But this episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security, but have been putting it off, and you'll want to listen to this right now. We've talked about it on the show before. Right now, Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast listeners can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for up to 50% off. This is their biggest deal of the year, and you don't want to miss out on it. And we've explained why we love this product so much. Flip and I both use it at our homes, especially when I live back at home in Ontario. I use it now at my apartment in Vancouver. It makes us feel safe. It makes our families feel safe, and just in general, especially over the holidays when there's, the increase of burglaries and packages taken off your porches, it makes us feel confident in the system and that we can go to sleep at night safe. That's why our friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe over the holidays and secure this holiday season for their families. Order your SimpliSafe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season over Christmas and the new year. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your next listen, though, go check out Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories, plus instant recaps, big game reactions, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. To continue on the topic of waiver wire ads for this week, I just wanted to mention this player real quick because I think he's played absolutely great for a fourth line guy and he's getting the job done. And I'm not going to get too deep into it, but Nick Roy from the Vegas Golden Knights, owned at 10% on both Yahoo and ESPN fantasy leagues. He's got 10 points on the season, 4 goals, 6 assists. And like Flip likes to talk about, if some of these players are averaging just over 15 minutes a game, that's someone to take a shot on. And even though he's on the fourth line of the Golden Knights, a strong Golden Knights team that is, even though he's only averaging 15 minutes a game, he's still seeming to get the job done. I did watch him against when they played the Toronto Maple Leafs and a couple of other games. He looks great out there. He goes hard to the net. He capitalizes on those rebounds and any opportunity that he really gets in the offensive zone. So I've really liked his game so far. I'm going to continue to keep an eye on him and see what happens with his game. But Nick Roy, 10 points on the season so far as a fourth line guy for the Golden Knights. Keep your eye on him. But now we got to get over to the must drops of week 6. And there's a couple of guys out there. I've only got 2 guys that I've really considered dropping at this point. I could probably throw in Thatcher Demko or Jordan Binnington because I've thought about it. I definitely have thought about it, but it's hard when there's not a lot of goalies out there in a 14-team roster, and you can only have 2 goalies on your roster anyways. Nonetheless, it seems like I always find myself continuing to vent about my goalie situation. But we'll get back to the must drops, forwards and defense here. 1 forward, 1 defense. Starting off with Michael Bunting from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Owned at 48% on Yahoo, 75% on ESPN. He's only got 6 points this season. He's been held off the score sheet for the last 5-6 games, I believe, maybe 4, but he's only got 1 point in his last 10 games. And really, there just hasn't been anything much to showcase what we saw last year. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe it's just a slow start. Who really knows what's going on with Michael Bunting because he's been bouncing around from the first, second, maybe even the third line a couple of times so far this year. As of right now, he's on the line with Marner and Matthews, so it doesn't make any sense that he's really not getting this job done or producing up front. He is averaging 15 and a half minutes, so that is the exact same that he was averaging last year, 15 and a half minutes last year as well. Again, maybe it's the fact that he's been bouncing around so much that he just can't seem to be getting that chemistry again with some of the guys he's playing with. He just has not been productive whatsoever. Only 6 points on the season, 27 shots, 17 hits, 10 blocks. I believe those are the stats for him. Honestly, not fantastic. It's just not great. And I have him again on a fantasy team. Just hasn't been doing much for me. And so that is, for me, might be a little biased, but that is the reason why if you're out there and you still have Michael Bunting, I think you're kind of holding on for now. I think there's a few other guys that you could pick up as of right now. Maybe you could trade him off as well if someone really wants Bunting or thinks that he's going to get going again. But I've mentioned a few guys that you can add for this upcoming week, and Bunting is one of those guys that you could definitely for sure drop. On the blue line, though, who you definitely can drop. John Klingberg of the Anaheim Ducks. Owned at 64% on Yahoo, 72% on ESPN Fantasy Leagues. Only has 7 assists on the season so far. Yeah, he had a good 4-game stretch, like maybe 6 games ago. He had put up 4 assists in that time. He's putting up shots, blocks, hits. He still seems to be doing that every so often, but 7 assists on the season for the Anaheim Ducks. Not a strong Ducks team, but nonetheless, like, you expect a little bit more. Excuse me. But especially from a guy who went out there, has made it known that he didn't want to go back with the Dallas Stars, wanted out of there, requested trades. He's in the off season. He's trying to figure out where he's going next. And he believes he's a top tier defenseman in this league, and he deserves the best sort of contract for himself. So he decides to take a 1-year contract worth $7 million and with the Anaheim Ducks, and tries to showcase, like, yeah, I am worth X amount of money for the next 6-7 years. But man, you're not. You just aren't. Like, you had a good thing going for you with the Dallas Stars. To me, it seems like you kind of just messed the bag up there a little bit. And he just has not been playing well, in my opinion. And they do have a couple of tough matchups ahead, especially this upcoming week. Anaheim Ducks that take on the Detroit Red Wings to start off the week. They've got the Winnipeg Jets, who have just looked really, really good and really, really solid so far. Connor Hellebuyck looks like the old self from 3-4 years ago, even maybe 2 years ago, because he's still one of the best goalies in the league. And they've got the St. Louis Blues on the weekend. So it's a little bit of a tough schedule for them. They're not great. They're at the bottom of the league, bottom of the Pacific Division. And it really, again, just has been a struggle for them. No help on the blue line. They've got so many young, talented forwards, but not really enough physical grit that really gets you involved into a game. And John Gibson, I think he's a fantastic goalie, but again, just has been a shell of himself over the last few years. And it's just really getting no help in the defensive zone, as well as just not helping himself out either. But those are the waiver wire ads and must drops for week 6. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the NBA season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis with every single game that is on. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the follow button. We appreciate all the love and support out there. And let's get into big-time bets, where the money is made. Look, if you follow me on Twitter, if you follow the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast on Twitter, I have been absolutely killing it. I started off the year very, very bad. I think I can't even remember what my record was, but it was a below 500 record. Locks of the night weren't hitting, struggling with my picks, didn't know what to do. But the last week and a half, it's been money. And it's been great for me, hitting 3 for 3 parlays, 2 for 3 single bets. The record's been going up. The lock of the night's been going up. I've just been on an absolute heater recently, and I'm going to try to continue that. And hopefully you guys out there can take some advice. Maybe you want to listen and put some money down. If you do, hopefully you win some money back in return. That's what we're doing. That's what our expectations are for big time bets, not just for us to win money, but throw out our reasoning and our logic behind why we chose these bets so you guys can play some money on them and get some money back in return. My first pick of the night, I have the team here, but I just want to make sure who they're playing just to confirm. But my first pick of the night is the LA Kings on the money line. I'm taking the LA Kings on the money line at plus 140 against the Calgary Flames. And honestly, I think the Kings have just been one of those teams that a little bit wishy-washy at times, but I think it's the right time to catch a team like the Calgary Flames who struggled. They were on a 6-game losing streak, I believe. They finally got their win, another win the other day. But Jonathan Huberdeau has not been in the lineup the last few games as well. He's been seen in a walking boot. We don't know how severe that ankle injury is. Overall, just without him, there's not enough star power, I believe. I think the Flames blue line is absolutely fantastic. But without Huberdeau, there really isn't much left. Also, another guy that I actually forgot to mention on the must drops list for this week and just for the future, Andrew Mangiapane has not been great. Just going to toss that out there as well now. But I'm taking the Kings on the money line at plus 140. I know they're on the road, but, Markstrom hasn't been the best either. And without Jonathan Huberdeau, there really just isn't much offensive power or wheelhouse. And I know he's been struggling, but still, there's no facilitating. There's no one really up there and getting shots on net, or it just seems a little off without him right now. So I'm going to take the Kings on the money line at plus 140. I'll take that every single day of the week. Second pick of the night, I'm taking the Ottawa Senators on the money line at minus 105. I said this, look, we know they're a lot better of a team than we've seen over the last little while. They're on that 6-game losing streak. They finally got their first win the other day. Forget who it was against. Let's go check here, though. Saturday, I believe they won on Saturday. Yeah, they beat the Philadelphia Flyers 4-1 on Saturday, so they finally got out of that gunk, out of that losing streak. And the New York Islanders are a strong team, especially the defensive zone and that sort of things, especially with Ilya Sorokin and Varlamov in the crease. But I really do think the Ottawa Senators are a lot better this year. They're going to win some good games against some good teams. Senators on the money line minus 105. But my lock of the night, I'm taking the Carolina Hurricanes on the puck line plus 120 against the Chicago Blackhawks, even with Frederik Andersen out. This team is too good defensively. I really do believe you can depend on Antti Raanta or Kochetkov, whoever will be in the crease for them in this game. I think they're outstanding. That is why the Hurricanes on the puck line plus 120 is my lock of the night. Those are the big time bets. Leave a comment on the YouTube video if you've won from any of these bets. Leave a comment on some of the trades we've talked about. If you want to ask us any questions, make sure you reach out on our Twitter page as well. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. We really do love hearing from all of our listeners out there who want some help with some fantasy leagues and our input and insight. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, please check out Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Just like this podcast, please hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We really do appreciate all the love and support out there. It does help this channel and our podcast out so much. So please continue to share it with friends and family. Share it on your social media. Follow us, subscribe to us. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow. Peace.